She took the trifecta right to the end, right? So she asked me, how my ACTIVZ business was going, and I started to tell her that I was really struggling with ACTIVZ because at that moment, because of what she was dealing with her cancer, she actually kind of got mad at me, and she said, "No, you are not allowed to use my situation as an excuse not to share what you have, and I don't give you permission to do that." And that is one of those things that just has stuck with me from from then until now. It's like, you know, don't make the excuse, no matter how bad it gets. Don't make an excuse to give up on what you have, to share what you have, to give up on your dreams.
I love that.
Wasn't easy all the time, certainly.
And I know for a fact there are people, even on this call, that I know that story kind of resonates. Like they've maybe started off at a certain rank, they got to a certain point, they had a certain amount of momentum,
Mhm.
and then things happen the other way. Things happen the other way, and I will say in my years of doing this business and working with leaders, very rarely does momentum just stay and stay and stay in
Mhm.
perpetuity forever and ever and ever. It is an inevitability that you will encounter some whitewater. You will encounter some whitewater, and it kind of depends up to you what you do with that whitewater. And with you, I mean, you encountered that whitewater, and you had to deal with it for a number of years. For years, you had to deal with that.
Mhm.
And I know that there would have been other people, if they encountered that situation, that would have thrown in the towel and said, "That's it. I'm done. This is too hard. I've had too many things happen to me." Um, but you hung in there. And in particular, in the last year, you have hit a period of momentum again. And not only momentum to go back to an A8, but you are now at an all-time high. You went all the way and you said, "Hey, I don't even need this rank. I want a new rank." And you got all the way up to an A9. Um, how my question for you, and I'm sure a lot of people, I think this is a very important thing. We talked about the concept of being open and following up. Could you share with us how, following up has played a role in your journey, in that momentum and that growth that you've had over the last 12 months?
Absolutely. We hear it all the time, right? Fortune is in the follow up. And I think until it's like a lot of things, right? Until you kind of experience that at some level, it doesn't really matter how significant, but it just makes a change in that moment. The term the fortune is in a follow up is a concept, but then one time it happens to you, and you're like, oh, right, it actually really works, right? If I apply it, so there's actually kind of two examples, right, that really in the last year and a half or so has really proven that true, right? One of those is, we have this amazing team with some just incredible leaders in the Midwest. And I actually, the top leader that we have out there, I actually contacted her. I knew her from a previous company. So we've known each other for 14 or 15 years now. And when we first met, we just had this connection, her and her husband and me, we just had this connection and we just hit it off, right? So even when I left that company, we stayed in touch. We just every once in a while connected with each other. So when I first came to ACTIVZ, so I don't know if this is the longest follow-up in history, in network marketing history, but when I first came to ACTIVZ, so 8 years ago, I reached out to her and her husband. And at that time, they were doing extremely well at their previous company. Um, and so that was a no, thank you. We're happy where we are. And so we just stayed in touch. And here's the thing, right? Is every time we reached out to each other, every time we talked, it was not about business. It was not about product, right? That may come up, but it was more about just maintaining the connection. And that went on for a number of years. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, some things began to change at that company. Maybe the products weren't so aligned with anymore. We know that there was some comp plan changes that really took a lot of money out of the pockets of the distributors. And then, so it was just getting closer and getting closer. The conversation was starting to change, right? So again, it wasn't high pressure. It's whenever you're ready. And then early last year, this is kind of funny because um, her husband reached out to me at the beginning of the year last year and said, okay, how are we going to get this to happen? We got to do something to help her make the move. And she actually didn't know this until after she joined us at ACTIVZ. But so anyway, so him and I began meeting and kind of scheming and planning, right? And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, in December of last year, I get this message that says, you and I need to talk. Okay. So I call her up and she said, okay, I'm ready. And she joined ACTIVZ and her husband with her, and they just hit the ground running. And that's actually, not only did she come in with a bang, she actually hit, I think, A7 in 4 months, 5 months from the time that she enrolled. And she went from A4 to A7 in May. So she's just doing an incredible thing. And now there's some more doors opening for her that's just going to continue to really grow and expand her business. So I'm really excited about that. I think, and then the other part, I think everybody's heard a lot about these amazing leaders we have in the Philippines. And that actually wasn't a direct, follow up on my behalf, but I think it still tells the story, right? This was kind of a combined effort with me and again, Paige Gimbel, right? Paige had a connection with one of the top leaders in the team there in the Philippines. And I was just happened to be in a place when I saw a message from Stu Carvalho, who's our VP of Asia, right? That said, hey, this other company is closing their business in the Philippines. And so, I brought that to Paige and, she had been following up with that leader for quite some time. And, because she had stayed connected, it created the opportunity. So again, it tells the same story. And, we hear it all the time. And most just don't do it. And like I said earlier, every contact doesn't have to be about the product. Every contact doesn't have to be about the business. Matter of fact, it's probably better if it's not. Because if you make your contacts focused on the business, the people will just feel like another number. I would say focus on building the relationship with your follow-ups. And when they're ready, they're ready, you know?
I love it. I love it. I think you hit the nail on the head, and it calls back to the earlier part of your story about the
Mhm.
concept of being open. Are you
Yep.
open? And talking to that couple who I also happen to know and who are amazing and who may be on this call today right now. In the beginning, at the time, not as open, but over the years, literally years, became more and more open, which is why every time, in my opinion, when you as a distributor receive the answer of no, the answer, I think, in my opinion, should be the answer is no for right now, right at this moment. And as long as you leave that door open of saying, hey, is it all right if I check in with you next week or next
Mhm.
month or whatever it is? If you're able to leave that door open, it opens up opportunities like what we saw here with Jerry. And I love the combination, Jerry, of persevering and making sure that even when things were down, when were going the wrong way, you held in there, you kept going, and look what's happened over the last year here with
Mhm.
your ACTIVZ business. It's incredible, and we've kind of arrived to our last question here, and this is really just for you. Like it's a freebie for you. It is, hey, just give us one gold nugget. If you can just give anyone one piece of advice, if there is anyone on this call who has not yet gotten to the rank of an A9, or anything, what would that one piece of advice be?
You know, I thought about this one a lot, and I think it comes down to just don't quit. What and I know that sounds real simple, right? And it's probably much easier to say than it is to do. Trust me. I mean, there were many times in the last 8 years that I just wanted to go, I'm done, right? But when I look at what we have here, and I look at, I have friends of mine at other companies doing businesses, they're doing well, right? But when I look at what we have here, when I look at the corporate team, when I look at the field leadership we now have, when I look at what our products do for people, when I look at what our compensation plan and what it does for people, you're not going to find a better opportunity than right here. And that's what I keep coming back to time and time again. Every time somebody brings me something, I look at it and it's always missing something, right? And this is a big part of what kept me going. So I would say this: each of us was brought to ACTIVZ for a reason. It's not always going to be perfect. but keep your promise to yourself and don't let the hard times win.